Would you still eat at your favourite restaurant if you knew it was flagged by food inspectors? Some places look clean, they look busy, they look safe. But behind the counter, behind the kitchen doors, a different story can be hiding. Before we start, let's be clear. This video is not about reviews, it's not about gossip, and it's not about hate. Every restaurant mentioned today appears on official Australian government registers, all within the last 24 months. These aren't opinions, they're records. Now, a penalty notice is not a conviction, and paying one is not an admission of guilt. But it is a warning, a public record, a signal that something wasn't right at the time of inspection. And that matters, because food safety doesn't work the way most people think. Restaurants aren't shut down the first time something goes wrong. They're warned, they're given time, they're expected to fix the problem. Most people assume that if a restaurant is still open, it must be safe. But that's not how the system works. The system assumes improvement, not perfection, and that means a place can look completely normal, while still sitting on a warning you've never seen. We're counting down 10 restaurants to avoid, and I'll show you how to choose safer places anywhere, even in your own suburb. We read the registers, so you don't have to. This restaurant looks modern, it's busy. And it's popular. It's the kind of place people recommend without thinking twice. But official records show it was issued a penalty notice for failing to maintain required standards of cleanliness, with previous warnings already given. That last part matters, because this wasn't a one-off. Inspectors had already flagged problems before. When inspectors walk into a kitchen like this, they're not judging taste or presentation. They're looking at systems, at routines, at whether cleaning happens consistently or only when someone remembers. Cleanliness failures usually mean shortcuts, rushed closing shifts, missed wipe downs, equipment that isn't being properly sanitized between uses, and those small shortcuts stack up. This is the kind of place that reminds you of one thing. High ratings don't mean high hygiene. Most customers judge a restaurant in seconds. A quick glance, a quick scroll through reviews, a quick decision. Inspectors don't work like that. They look at what happens when no one is watching, how food moves through the kitchen, where it sits, how long it waits. They check fridges that customers never see, shelves behind curtains, prep benches during busy hours, not quiet ones. And what often surprises people is this. A place doesn't need to be filthy to fail. It just needs to be inconsistent. One missed clean, one rushed close, one staff member who wasn't trained properly. That's how small problems become patterns. And patterns are exactly what inspectors track. The next place on our list doesn't rely on secrecy. It relies on scale. And when scale replaces control, even small mistakes can multiply fast. Buffets always feel like value for money. More food, more choice, more plates coming and going. But buffets also mean more handling, more surfaces, and more opportunities for things to go wrong if standards slip. This location received a penalty notice for failing to store food in a way that protected it from contamination. Again, with previous warnings noted. Food storage is one of the first things inspectors check, because temperature and separation are non-negotiable. Hot food that cools too slowly, cold food that warms too much. Raw and cooked items stored too close together. These aren't technicalities. They're the basics. When food isn't stored properly, risk rises fast, and the customer never sees it happening. Cheap food isn't cheap if corners are being cut. Buffets are especially unforgiving environments. Food sits out longer, hands move faster, staff rotate constantly. That means systems matter more than intentions. Inspectors don't just check what's happening right now. They check logs, they check dates, they check whether staff actually follow procedures when things get busy. Because busy kitchens don't slow down for safety. They speed up. And when speed replaces care, that's when temperature slips. That's when separation fails. That's when contamination risk rises. Customers see variety, Inspectors see exposure, and the more food moves, the more chances there are for something to go wrong. This is the pattern. These places don't look unsafe. That's why people keep lining up. But dirty kitchens don't always look dirty. And bacteria doesn't announce itself. A surface can look spotless and still be unsafe. And sometimes warnings get ignored because fixing systems costs time and money. This is where cost pressure quietly enters the picture. Cleaning properly takes time. Training staff properly takes money. Replacing equipment costs both. When margins get tight, these are the first things that get delayed. Not cancelled, just postponed. Tomorrow instead of today. Next week instead of now. And from the outside, you'd never know. The dining room still looks fine. The food still comes out hot. The place still feels safe, but inspectors are trained to spot what customers can't. Worn seals, improvised fixes, temporary solutions that became permanent. That's why enforcement exists. Not to punish businesses, but to protect the public when shortcuts start stacking up. And when those shortcuts touch the very tools that handle your food, that's when the risk moves from hidden to direct. Another popular spot, another modern dining room. But inspectors issued a penalty notice here for failing to keep fixtures, fittings and equipment clean, with previous warnings already on record. Equipment cleanliness matters because it touches food directly. Chopping boards, benches, utensils, preparation surfaces. If those aren't properly cleaned, every meal after that carries risk. Inspectors don't guess, they check residue. They check build-up. They check routines. Mistakes happen. But repeated breaches are choices. Food contact equipment is one of the highest risk areas in any kitchen. It touches raw food, then cooked food, then ready-to-eat food. If cleaning breaks down here, everything downstream is affected. That's why inspectors focus so heavily on build-up, residue and routine. They don't ask if something was cleaned once. They look for signs it's cleaned every time. Consistency is the difference between safe and unsafe. And inconsistency is exactly what repeated notices reveal. Now this one goes further. This rolled location wasn't just fined, it was prosecuted. And a guilty conviction was recorded. Official records list multiple failures, including food safety knowledge, contamination protection, and general hygiene requirements. That tells a bigger story, because food safety knowledge isn't optional, it's the foundation. If staff don't understand temperature control, cross-contamination or hand hygiene, systems fall apart fast. Same brand name, different outcome, chains aren't safer just because they're big. Large chains rely on systems to work at scale, training manuals, checklists, standard procedures. But systems only work if people follow them. And food service has one of the highest staff turnover rates of any industry. That means constant retraining, constant supervision, constant risk of gaps, one understaffed shift, one new hire thrown into the deep end, one supervisor stretched too thin. That's all it takes for a location to fall behind. This is why enforcement focuses on the premises, not the brand. Because consistency on paper doesn't always mean consistency in practice. This is where regulators escalate. Warnings are meant to correct behaviour. They're a chance to improve. When warnings don't work and risks remain, cases move forward. And sometimes they end up in court. This restaurant appears on Victoria's Register of Convictions. A court recorded a guilty outcome for multiple food safety failures, including handling food in a way that could render it unsafe. Court cases mean evidence was reviewed. Inspection records, follow-ups, documentation. Not opinions, not rumours. These are not paperwork errors. This is the system stepping in when risks aren't resolved. By the time a case reaches a court register like this, it usually means inspectors have already tried compliance first. Notices, follow-ups, opportunities to fix the problem. A conviction doesn't happen because of one bad day. It happens when unsafe practices continue long enough that regulators decide intervention is necessary. And for customers, that's the key takeaway. Court outcomes aren't about punishment. They're about risk reaching a level where warnings alone weren't enough. Another Victorian venue. Another conviction. This case involved multiple breaches including pest-related risks, cleanliness issues and temperature control failures. Pests aren't just unpleasant. They're a sign of deeper problems. They mean gaps, openings, cleaning routines that aren't working. Once a case reaches this stage, it means the issues were serious enough to justify prosecution. Big reputations don't cancel out small details. Court outcomes don't happen overnight, they usually come after inspections. Then warnings, then follow-ups. By the time a case reaches prosecution, multiple chances have already passed. That's why convictions matter. They represent the point where regulators decide that risk wasn't reduced fast enough. And when that decision is made, the public deserves to know. Transparency isn't about shaming. It's about information, so people can make informed choices. Before they sit down and order, most people never see this information, but it's public, and it tells a very clear story. Western Australia publishes the names of offenders, where convictions occur. This restaurant appears on that list, with a recorded conviction, within the last 2 years. WA only keeps these records public for 24 months, so if it's still visible, it's recent. Western Australia's system is stricter than many people realise. Names don't stay public forever. They drop off once the display period ends, which means if you're seeing a venue listed, the conviction is recent enough that regulators believe the public still needs to know. This isn't about digging up old history, it's about current, relevant risk information that most customers never think to check. Another WA conviction, different venue, same outcome. Food safety breaches serious enough to be recorded and published by health authorities. Western Australia doesn't keep these listings public forever. They're time limited, so when a restaurant appears here, it means the conviction is recent enough that regulators believe the public still needs to know. That's what gives these records weight. They're not opinions, they're not warnings. They're outcomes, and when an issue reaches this stage, it tells you the problem wasn't resolved earlier, and the risk was considered significant enough to document publicly. This restaurant also appears new on WA's official offenders list. A conviction was recorded and the details were published publicly. By this point, this isn't about taste, it's about risk. Most people only think about food safety after something goes wrong, after they get sick, after someone in the family does. Registers like this exist to flip that around. They're meant to be checked before you order, not after you regret it. And once you realise how easy they are to access, it becomes clear how much information was always there, just unused. This is the most recent conviction on our list. While the offences occurred earlier, the court conviction was recorded within the last 2 years, which is why it appears publicly now. That distinction matters, because information doesn't disappear just because time passes. This is exactly why checking registers matters. A lot of people think food safety information disappears over time, that once a case is finished, it's no longer relevant. But registers don't work like gossip. They work like records. They show pattern, they show history, they show whether issues were isolated or recurring. And even when a business improves, the record still tells you something valuable. It tells you where attention was needed. Food safety isn't about punishment, it's about awareness, and awareness gives you power. Food safety isn't enforced by brand, it's enforced by location. A logo doesn't clean a kitchen, and popularity doesn't replace accountability. So how do you protect yourself without never eating out again? No restaurant is perfect, and no place is safe forever. But safer choices share patterns. They have no recent enforcement history visible on public registers. They're transparent about training. They take hygiene seriously. You can often recognise these signals before you order. Clean bathrooms, clear allergen information, staff washing hands properly. Calm kitchens that aren't rushed or chaotic. Safer places don't rush transparency. They don't get defensive when you ask questions. They don't hide procedures. They don't treat hygiene like an inconvenience. You'll often see staff correcting each other calmly, wiping as they go, resetting between tasks. These are small signals, but they matter because good habits show up everywhere and bad habits rarely stay hidden for long. Safe isn't about price, it's about accountability. Once you know this, you'll never choose blindly again because you'll know what to check. And yes, we can talk about how to identify safer picks. I'm not recommending restaurants, I'm showing you how to verify them yourself. But I'm only doing it one way. If a place has a public hygiene score from routine inspections and they display it, that's a stronger signal than vibes. In New South Wales, that's the Scores on Doors certificate. It shows how well the business complied at their last inspection. So here's the rule. If I call a place safer, it's because there's something you can verify yourself. Look for the certificate near the counter or entry. I've linked the official rating pages and checkers in the description. If it's not displayed, that's your cue to be extra cautious. Quick reminder, a score is a snapshot in time, not a lifetime guarantee. But it's still one of the strongest public signals you can use. Tonight, check your local area, search the official registers, see what's already public. I've linked the exact government registers for each state in the description. Have you ever eaten somewhere and later found out it was flagged by inspectors? If this helped you, hit like. Subscribe for more avoid versus safe guides. And comment your suburb or state. We'll tell you where to check. Stay informed, stay skeptical, and don't let a cheap meal cost you your health. I'll see you in the next one.